Welcome to Wise Minds, Wild Hearts, the podcast for heart-led high achievers just like you, ready to take inspired action and achieve true alignment. If you're craving deeper influence, greater impact, and a life that genuinely lights you up, you're in the right place. I'm Kip Clark, former academic turned entrepreneur, transformational coach, elite athlete, and shameless fountain pen addict. Here, you'll learn how to leverage the beautiful wisdom of your years with the wild passion that drives you forward. Together, we'll break through those limiting beliefs, unlock the power of your subconscious mind, and create a life that aligns with your soul's desire. Ready to create the kind of impact you've always dreamed of? Let's do this. Hey there, my beautiful friend. Welcome back. It's Kip here. I'm ready to take you on another adventure where we're going to shift perspectives and break free from the old unproductive way of doing things. And today I'm going to talk about two terms that might seem innocent enough, but they have a massive impact on how we show up as leaders, as partners, as colleagues, and even as friends. I'm going to talk about expectations versus agreements. And that sounds pretty straightforward, right? But buckle up, my friend, because we're going to really blow the lid off this one. So let's take a look first into expectations, because these are sneaky. They're sneaky. They're like invisible tripwires. They cause all kinds of stress, and often the person on the receiving end has no idea they're even there. So talk about unfair. So let's take a look at what's really going on with expectations. So first of all, I said they're sneaky because they're implicit. They're often unspoken, and that makes them especially damaging. How can someone meet a standard she doesn't even know exists? It's like a trap, and it's a setup for failure. Expectations also create a power imbalance between people. They create a kind of power over dynamic where the person holding the expectation over another person it's like that person's holding the invisible card, so to speak, and the receiver of the expectation is left kind of guessing at how to win the game. That's not supportive, and it's definitely not going to be productive. Expectations also cause stress because we put all this pressure on people to just know what we want without saying it out loud. So it's like expecting someone to be a mind reader. Anybody living with the weight of expectations day in and day out will rarely be thriving because most people don't perform well under that kind of pressure. Expectations are not democratic. The person on the receiving end doesn't have a say, and that's where things get dicey because it's one-sided, and nobody likes being on the losing end of an unspoken rule book. And then the other thing is that with expectations, whatever outcome arises from them, it's rarely a great outcome. So even with the best case scenario where the expectation has been met, the person has done what you were expecting, but it's not a big deal because you were expecting it. So there's no excitement around that. It was expected. It's just like, okay, you've done that thing, so now let's just get on with the next thing. Now, with the worst case scenario, and that's that the expectation isn't met, it's not fulfilled, well, now there's disappointment, there's regret, there's frustration, there may be anger. So neither of those is really a great outcome. But here is the really meaty part of this. Expectations don't come from a place of genuine leadership where growth is the goal, growth and transformation. That's the real power of leadership. That's the pinnacle of leadership. But expectations are rarely about growth. They're almost always about control. Now think about that. Leading through expectations is like asking somebody to fly a kite that's been weighed down with heavy chains. It's never going to fly as well. Now, the flip side of this, let's look at agreements, because agreements are just so much better. If expectations are those unspoken heavy barriers to growth and fulfillment, agreements are the keys that open up creativity and collaboration and genuine productivity. They're amazing. So let's look at a few reasons why. First of all, agreements are democratic. So unlike expectations, agreements involve both parties. It's not about standing on a hill shouting instructions like a drill sergeant here. Agreements are a conversation, it's a negotiation, it's a co-creation. And by the way, true agreements never involve force or coercion. If you're forcing someone to agree with you, that is not an agreement. That's a directive. Then that's not what we want here. Agreements are also much more creative for problem solving because they're negotiated, meaning both sides get to weigh in, they brainstorm, and then they come up with something better than either party could have created alone. So if you're looking for creative solutions, agreements are where it's at, my friend. Agreements also allow both people to be invested in the outcome. So when both parties agree, there's a level of ownership there on both sides. And when there's ownership, things actually get done. People genuinely like fulfilling agreements, and they genuinely dislike being saddled with expectations. Agreements are also amazing as rocket fuel for productivity, because now you've got two people who are, they're rowing the boat in the same direction, not just one person. So you're just going to get there faster. And then leading through agreement shows genuine leadership. It shows you value collaboration over control. And that's how real leaders view leadership. Instead of this is my way or the highway kind of approach, it's a let's create this together kind of approach. And this is something I'm really passionate about, this idea that leadership should be about fostering the growth and transformation of those we're leading and not about dictating how everything should go. Over the years, since the time I was a teenager and had my first part-time job, I've experienced all kinds of leadership styles. And I can say with complete conviction that anybody who attempts to lead by expectation is no leader. That's not leadership. That's management. That's a clear signal that this is a person who doesn't understand what leadership is really about. It's a person who, it would seem, hasn't spent much time working on his leadership, someone who's more focused on himself and controlling his environment than it is on leading by example. True leadership, genuine leadership, is always collaborative, it's inclusive, it's democratic, and always it's focused on the growth of those we lead. Now, there's a ton of research that backs all this up. For example, a study from a few years ago around expectations and the psychological stress that creates shows really clearly that expectations cause enormous emotional distress, can lead to frustration and resentment, and can cause permanent damage to relationships. Expectations really just set people up for failure. Other studies show that agreements promote collaboration. They clearly demonstrate that when employees participate in creating agreements, they're much more engaged and they're much more productive. And we also know that when people agree on something, they're much more likely to follow through. So another study on goal setting shows that the commitment to a task dramatically increases when a person has had a hand in defining the terms for it. So the research is very, very clear. Expectations are like a recipe for stress, while agreements create a much, much greater chance for success. Now, I know we've been looking into how this plays out in leadership in professional context, but I would be doing you a huge disservice if we didn't also talk about how expectations versus agreements show up in our personal lives too. I mean, just think about it. Family, friendships, marriages, partnerships, etc. If you look closely, I'm guessing you might catch yourself slipping into expectation mode from time to time with the people closest to you, almost without your noticing it. And I say that because it's something I notice in myself too sometimes. Maybe it's expecting a partner to know exactly what we need after a long day without having to say it. Well, spoiler alert, they can't read our minds. So we're expecting them to do that, and that rarely results in a good outcome. Or maybe we expect a friend to reach out just because we haven't heard from that person for a while. And then what happens when the person doesn't reach out? We feel frustrated. We maybe feel hurt. And, that's just a lot of disappointment there. So expectations in our personal relationships are like a perfect setup for misunderstanding. And just like in a professional context, expectations in personal relationships create the same kind of invisible pressure. So whether it's expecting your spouse or partner to know just what you want in any given moment, or assuming that a friend is automatically going to support your choices, you're laying down unspoken rules without checking if the other person even knows they exist or that they agree with them. Agreements just naturally build stronger bonds. They're what make relationships thrive. Just think about how much smoother things would run if you and your partner or spouse have an agreement about who's handling what around the home, or when you and your kids have an agreement about how holiday gatherings will go, or you and a friend agree on how often you're going to stay in touch and catch up. So there's no guessing with agreements. There's no disappointment. There's just clarity and collaboration. Now, if one or the other party doesn't fulfill on an agreement, that's still not cause for upset or frustration. It's just a signal that maybe the agreement hasn't been completed, or maybe it just needs to be renegotiated. So this perspective removes the prickly emotions that leave us feeling unhappy and stressed. And instead, it fosters a proactive approach where things get done and everybody involved is much, much happier. Now, there are times when an agreement with somebody is consistently not fulfilled. That's a different conversation to have. That may be a sign that the person is ill-suited to the agreement being made, or perhaps on a broader context, even ill-suited to the job or the role that she's in. So again, that's a different conversation. So what I'm talking about is eliminating the guesswork, eliminating the invisible rule book, and just making everything really explicitly clear so that there's less chance of misunderstanding. So whether it's at home or at work, or even in the way you show up for yourself, remember, expectations trap us in stress and disappointment. But agreements, in a way, they set us free because they unleash creativity and connection and collaboration. And that's really where the magic is for creating and maintaining strong, healthy relationships all around. So let's be wild enough here to just let go of that crushing control, and wise enough to embrace the power of true agreements. It's just a beautiful blend of perspectives, and it really works. So how can we put this into action? Well, next time you catch yourself sliding into expectation mode, pause, ask yourself, how can I turn this expectation into an agreement with this person? What conversation needs to happen here? And what kind of creative solutions could we come up with together? Because trust me, once you get into the flow of agreements, you're going to feel lighter and more productive. And you'll feel more excited too about what you're creating, because you're going to see how your leadership blossoms from the space of mutual empowerment. Okay, my friend, that's it for today's episode. I'd love to get your help in sharing this podcast with other people. So if there's someone you know that you think could benefit from this, please share it with that person or those people. You can hit subscribe, you can leave a review, and just let's keep this beautiful ride going. Until next time, take care. All right, my friends, that's it for this episode. If this has been helpful to you, let me know. I love to hear about all the positive changes you're making in your life. And if there's someone you know who might benefit from hearing this message, please share the love, my friend. See you next time on Wise Minds, Wild Hearts.